Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Welcome to this GFGCF joint event of delivering adaptation support by GCF and GF to LDCs and SIDS. We are going to um, the reason that we wanted to have this joint event was basically to hear from our country colleagues. As I was mentioning to a couple of people here, we don't get this good opportunity to hear directly from countries on how we can help better in terms of addressing the adaptation in countries. That's why we have put in together, in our view, excellent panelists here today. I'm actually going to start by inviting our panelists to the to the dais here. So I'll begin by inviting His Excellency Dimitrio, State Secretary of Environment of Timor-Leste. Excellency, please. Then I'm going to invite Honorable Secretary Dr. Farhina Ahmed of Bangladesh. We have invited two, and actually we have third one. We have invited Miss Madeline, who is also a chair of LDC group at the UNFCCC process. And she's running a little bit late right now because she also has to coordinate for her group. But in the meantime, I think we will start going ahead with the program. And as we progress, we will invite Madeline to join us and tell us more about some of the wonderful. Excellent. So we have Mr. Aziz in place of Madeline. As Madeline, I mentioned, Madeline is a little bit busy right now. Not little bit busy. I think little bit is quite an understatement of what's going on our plate. Can you hear me? Right. So thank you. Thank you again. Welcome to this wonderful program. This is I'm going to co-coordinate this session with my colleague from GCF, Mr. Eduardo, standing there. We have divided labor in order for us to have efficient use of time as well as get the best of what we could offer here. I'm going to just set context a little bit here. And the context is that in discussing about delivering and support to LDC and SIDS, I think most of us already know that, but we wanted to, from the Jeff part, we would like to highlight how we have done so far. Right? So the support for adaptation by the Jeff has been delivered through two funds, Least Developed Country Funds and Special Climate Change Fund. And this is very relevant in the context of what is being discussed here at the COP, because these funds were established in 2001 in response to specifically to address the needs of LDCs and some vulnerable countries. And that's how we have had 20 years of good experience working with LDCs and SIDS and other developing countries. And specifically on LDCs, in our 20 years, I think this is one of the largest adaptation portfolios in LDC countries. We're talking about $1.7 billion. And we have SCCF, combining with SCCF, we're talking about more than $2 billion in delivering the adaptation supports. What it meant to the countries, in our understanding, is this has actually helped the countries that has directly benefited about 60 million people and also helped to build the resilience in about in close to 13 million hectares of the land. So that's what has happened, just to set the context. Now, we are looking forward, in the context of what we are looking forward, is that we are going to continue supporting LDCs, the grant-based finance. And for next 4 years, we're actually looking to program for more than $1 billion for LDCs. And also, we are trying to program, quite a significant amount of money for climate change, a special climate change fund as well. So this is the context we have. And now, again, as I mentioned, we believe that there are a lot of things that we can learn. And in our conversation today, I think we will be listening to what we can do better, what has worked in our collaboration, and a lot of the supports are now being delivered in coordination with our sister fund, Green Climate Fund. So with that, I wanted to hand over mic to Eduardo to cover briefly about GCF aspects of how this has been delivering support in LDCs and SIDS, and then we'll open up conversations amongst ourselves. Eduardo, you have the mic.
Thank you, Dorji. Seems like this is working well, right? Thank you, thank you. Well, as Dorji said, this is a conversation we wanted to have with you, with our distinguished guests, so we understand how is it that the GCF and the GEF, how is it that this collaboration is working today, or is it that we have made progress, have made good decisions, where is it that perhaps you would see points in which we can do it differently, and where perhaps are the areas in which we have to collaborate further, in your opinion? So I won't spend too much time on the GCF, but just to bring a few highlights. As you know, the GCF is mandated to invest or to try to strike a balance between investigation and investments and mitigation adaptation of about 50-50. And within adaptation, half of that has to go to LDCs, SIDS, and African states. So that's a mandate. And I brought just a cheat sheet here just to give you some very high-level numbers. So far, we're happy to have had 53 funded proposals with SIDS, 85 projects with the LDCs, about $1.35 billion committed to SIDS, $3.1 billion committed to LDCs. We have to do more. This year we've seen the GCF approving strategies or receiving the mandate from the board to expedite, to facilitate access, to simplify our processes. So we're in that process as well of making sure that access to the GCF becomes more adequate. And within that effort, of course, we're mandated to work with the GCF, as Dorji mentioned, to ensure complementarity, coherence between our investments, and this is the scope of this conversation. So I wanted to break the ice with that, following my colleague Dorji with just a few highlights, but we'll move right straight into the conversation with you and with our distinguished panelists. So we brought 3 questions. The idea is that we will ask the questions one by one, but we would like to invite the 3 of you to just share your thoughts with us. So I'll start with the first 2 questions. Yes, perhaps yes, I can start with perhaps Dr. Yes. Make sure I get the question right here. Just a second.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Dr. Demetri.
Yes.
The idea, if I may, is that we would like to ask you a question. Can I start with the question, or would you like to have an opening? This is a dialogue, so very informal. But what do you prefer?
Whatever, but I think I would like to have an open statement before the questions, if you allow.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I think I would like to highlight a few points. The LDCs and SIDS are the most vulnerable and suffer the most from the frequent climate-induced disaster. LDCs and SIDS are also very lacking of resources for recovering after affecting by climate-induced disasters and different climate-induced disaster. If we observe every year global vulnerability index, 80% of the list from 20 first 20 country, majority from LDCs and SIDS. We, Timor-Leste, back to 2021, we have one big event affected by Serosa tropical cyclone. Uh, During the event, we lost 44 people, and in terms of infrastructures and economical loss of the events, we still, for the recovery, we need to have about $500 million to be able to recover, counting the statement made by Jeff, the money, the resources mobilized 1.7 billion for adaptations. If we see uh, the cost for recovering also very high, if we don't have enough and proper finance for adaptations, SIDS and LDCs will suffer and will uh, affect not only one sector but multi-sector, including um, capacity for recovery. LDCs and SIDS needs conditions to develop more resilience, and that we need um, resources like appropriate technology to um, assess and have our systematic data on climate and water forecast to be able to predict risks and minimize risks to our people, and to cope with um, uh, climate induced disasters, potentially induced disaster in the future. We have experiences, both ZEF and GCF financing. For example, with GCF, we have right now we have three projects in implementation stage. The first one is related to um, increasing um, resilience to infrastructures and rural asset of the community for adaptations. Second one is increasing our early warning system. And the third one is related to um, sustainable catchment and forest, agroforest management. But one general comment of those project in implementations, if we observe both financial mechanism for environment and climate, the nature for creations of those funding is to solve environmental and climate crisis, but because um, different administrative and implementations procedures, sometimes the disbursements of funds to the project in implementation cycle is delayed, and that's affected. That's contributed to the delay of increasing country resilience to climate induced disaster. So we think we really need to have appropriate reflections for both financial institutions to do um, uh, to assess how they can serve better to better delivering our climate actions. I think that's my first statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. De Carvalho. And you actually, thank you for the statement. You actually already opened it up quite aligned with what we had in mind. Perhaps I'll ask Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Aziz if they would like to also make an opening statement or address what we had in mind as the first question, which was about where do you see that the two institutions, GCF and GCF, working together, have done this work well, where we have been able to collaborate. But we also, of course, welcome if you want to do an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the very outset, I would thank GF and GCF for organizing this important discussion and inviting me as a panelist here. It's indeed a good opportunity for us to share our thoughts. Also, I would like to share that that we are grateful because GCF and GF is a dedicated window to support the LDCs and SIDs for delivering adaptation support to these countries. And so far, from the beginning, Bangladesh has received, in terms of GCF fund, that the amount is approved 5 national projects with allocation of 101 million in grant and 250 million US dollar in terms of concessional loans. However, parallel to that, our government of Bangladesh itself has to spend $480 million for climate change trust fund in addition to that. And you all know that Bangladesh is a developed LDC country, and it's a 7th rank in terms of climate change risk. We lost 1% of our GDP every year due to climate change disaster and natural calamities. And our land is situated as a delta in the Bay of Bengal. And every year we face a tremendous level of country natural disasters, cyclones, tornadoes, tidal wave, flash flood. It's a regular phenomena. And our journey towards development, developed economy is like a climbing through a wily bamboo. We climb a little bit and again we fall down due to climate change. So this is happening, and Bangladesh government is trying its hard from its own fiscal space, at the same time through bilateral support from our friendly development partners, and also definitely the GIF and GCF support. And especially I would like to mention that recently we have approved our national adaptation plan, that is with the help of GCF fund. It is a great task, and the project was very, I would say, very liberal, and we undertook a very consultative process throughout the country, and our civil society, our different group of people, women group, youth group, different academia, research people, development partners, every corner of the people. Through this project, we have talked and collect their views, and in line with this, we have developed our national adaptation plan, and it is owned by all section of population and our partners. So now we are ready with our very ambitious and very thoughtful adaptation plan, and we thank GCF for that support. And I would like to mention that not only us, that at the beginning, that our colleague Dorji has mentioned that GCF and GF fund support is has been benefited around 60 million of vulnerable people. So definitely they are doing a great job. And if I talk about specific that how GF and GCF have done altogether support specific need of LDCs and SIDs. And through the UNFCCC, the journey is quite long, but it's a very slow and steady process. Sometime country like Bangladesh vulnerable, we feel disappointed, but at the same time, window like GCF and GF and the establishment, it make us hopeful, and it is heartening to know that the fund allocation is going to be doubled. So it is a good news for LDCs and also for the SIDs. But we'd like to see that. I think I would mention GC. I would like to mention the GF portion so far. We have received so far 34 million USD from GF fund for our 5 adaptation projects, and 2 are in the pipeline. So we acknowledge the support we received from GCF and GF in our adaptation journey. But if I mention about the challenges in getting and accessing those funds, the country like Bangladesh, sometimes we heard that we lack capacity to accessing that fund, the application process and the complexity. Our people, our concerned officials, they are not very well conversant, and the research and feasibility is required for that. Sometimes it takes a long time in accessing that fund. That is a big challenge for our country. And another point I would like to mention that we received the fund of GCF and GF through some other organization like UNDP or FAO or like other organizations. Government do not have the direct access. So that is another problem, that if we have to go through intermediaries for implementation, it definitely becomes higher cost and expensive, costly and expensive, because UN system and other system, they have certain standard of expenditure cap. So they spend in their own standard, and if the amount, the allocation, we could at our priority and with our standard, and definitely it would be much more, I think, cheaper and with a very. So that is one problem. DF and GCF should look at this area. The involvement of intermediary bodies can be removed in the process, and how the process of research and the approval process and the preparation process can be simplified and templated, and it should be country need based. How the state, how capacity, how much capacity they have, they should the project design should be templated in such a way that countries and departments and agencies, the people can get access with their that kind of ability. That should be the need based and capacity based. If you set certain standard that this much standard should, and by this time vulnerable country will become more vulnerable, that time will pass. And I'd like to mention one very important from our perspective, that if you consider each and every state party as equal, I think it is not a fair or right-based thing for a vulnerable country. The equity approach, the more vulnerable, the more priority should get into. So you should have certain kind of rating from your own studies, that more risk-oriented countries should get a certain level of score, so that it's kind of, you can say, an affirmative action is required to assess their proposal in accessing those funds. So that is one humble appeal to GCF and GF window, because from the whole UN process, of the promised $1 billion, and when we look at the calculation, all the commercial loans and all the bilateral loans are calculated under the UNFCCC umbrella that country has received. So, which is not actually meant for climate change actions. So, if the country, bilateral and other development partners that countries are receiving, that amount should be go through some kind of tagging of GCF and GF, so that we can make sure that this much amount is dedicated only for climate change and vulnerable people, not for the private sector and other activities. So that kind of a special and affirmative action can be included by GF. That is my suggestion. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. I will turn now to Dr. Aziz. Dr. Aziz, the question is the same, but I heard from Dr. Demetrio, Dr. Ahmed, points in which we have had success, points in which we. So the question to you is, I'll already move to both. Leave you with both for your comments on what we've done well and what we've not done so well so far, and you would like to see improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want also, first of all, to apologize Mrs. Madeleine Sarr, because he have a coordinating meeting. That's why he will be able to join us. But I'm very happy to be part of this important discussion about how we can move together between maybe the windows of GCF and GF windows to better improve and selling up by financing our climate change project. As the ministry said, LDCs and SIDS, they are very vulnerable countries, and the situation on our country is that if we need to go fast and to address really many financing on climate change solution, we cannot do it with only one window. As we know, we have many projects financed by GCF in our countries, but if you can now mix GCF windows and GF windows, we can address more financing and develop more projects by addressing adaptation and mitigation things on our country to better help the community to through to the sustainable resilience. But we have challenges. We face too many challenges, as maybe the other side. First of all, is to develop more resilient projects. For this, we need to work most only using one mechanism. But on this way, if we can blend multiple instruments, this is also will better help maybe stakeholders on the agriculture maybe level, on the private sector level, public level, to better understand, maybe address some specific projects for each activity accordingly to our LDC program. But because as you know, we need more fund, we need many funds to really our project implementation according to our NDCs. So this is development of a very strong and bankable resilient project is one of the challenges. The other thing is also to support the appropriate technology. This is also, and the ministry also talk about this. This is very important, because if we want really to move to a very best resilient way for the vulnerable community, we need to do a very good analysis of their needs and to address really the appropriate technology. The third thing is monitoring data. Many of in the development project when the GCF ask to the countries, they have to do many work on monitoring their data, and sometimes we need knowledge, we need more support for putting in place some how to say, some way to better give possibility to the countries to better build, to better put in place a system by monitoring those data. Knowledge also of in the and to better know how to mitigate the risk in the challenges. If you analyze all those challenges, so, and we want to really address relevant project to this is, I think GF and the GF are important windows we can use to address it, because maybe if you take the project finance in our country, if I take the example of Senegal, Jeff addressed some specific projects to dedicate stakeholders. And if you want to scaling up by using maybe the Green Climate Fund windows, we need to mix the two mechanisms to better address maybe some specific relevant project in adaptation or mitigation. We need also to have, if you go to in our country, for example, the G focal point and the GCF focal point, they need to develop a lot of communication on the both mechanism and work maybe talk with the NDCs, talking with the government, talking with the private sector to better to understand what really is the possibility given by going in both on the GCF windows and the green in the GF windows and the green climate fund windows. Sometimes this lack of communication also is one of the problem we are facing on the low development countries. I think in the scaling up project by using windows to better allow needs on adaptation and mitigation is the way we need to go really in our countries. And yes, I think is it very important also to have to develop more knowledge for the stakeholders and better allow them to understand accordingly to the two mechanisms what will be the project they can finance and how to go through to address needs on this. I think for my introduction, this is maybe what I can share with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aziz. And thank you for mentioning also that the suggestion for the focal points of the GCF and the GEF to communicate, to speak more. And this is also very important to us. I heard a few points, positive and a few negative points as well, related to the need for capacity, need for data, need to faster access to resources. But I think my colleague, I'll hand over the floor to my colleague Dorji, who might want to explore from a different angle and ask you another question. Over to you, Dorji.
Sure. Thank you, Eduardo. So I wanted to actually pick up from Aziz's point. A couple of things I think was very interesting coming up was that you talked about the scaling up, and you rightly mentioned about how GFGCF should be working together in an effort to scale up the adaptation investment. And I think just as an information, this is the similar guidance that we have received from COPs, Conference of Parties here for last few years. And in response to COP guidance, what we have done is that GFGCF now came up with something called long-term vision on complementarity and we just in short call it LTV. I think this was in a way I think it probably is too premature for us to come up and say that this has worked or this has not worked. But what has happened this week was that we have actually gone ahead and chosen again the need for the access to finance. And Excellency, I think the Bangladesh is one of the pilot countries that we are going to try this out. There are actually 5 countries, SIDS and LDCs, that we wanted to see in terms of real implementations on the ground in trying to pull to get up into the to the scale is what is required. And that said, that I think both Eduardo, myself, and anyone working in the climate finance or anywhere else, we are very cognizant of His Excellency Dimitrios' view that the need for finance is huge, and the one that we provide, especially from LDCF and SECF, has not been our support has grant-based support, and I think that hopefully I think that's helping countries, and we look forward to have more results and data being generated from that one. Well, the question that I actually wanted to ask was, having this context again, is that we're going to start with 5 countries piloting the implementation of long-term visions of complementary incoherence. The idea is that, for example, if NAPS Bangladesh is being, we know this being funded by LDCF, is there anyone, can LDCF come and help you implement that? That's it. We do not want to duplicate the work that's already being done. We wanted to build it up on what's being done to the point of getting up, scaling out, however you want to find. So the question I wanted to ask all the panelists here is that maybe it's too premature. There are projects that we know on the ground that's being coordinated between GFGCF, but not being made to the level of the what's being discussed at this point. We are actually interested in listening to you in terms of what could work in the context of us working together in serving you better. Things like communication with OFP and NDA. We would very much think that this is something very important. But from the fund side, these are things that's very limited of what we can do, because this is a country drivenness. Country needs to prefer that, and we honestly we can't do much that one other than facilitating you guys to come together and discuss and make sure that the communication channel between you guys are being cleared off. Beside that, we can't do much things like that. But I really am interested to learn about what is it that from your experience that we can work together in the interest of scaling up the investment. Madam.
Thank you very much. If I talk about, I think it's working now. From a country perspective, to us, GCF and GF, it's kind of a special window. So we cannot label with 2 different. It is problematic. If it can become one window, our processing time, the process for a project we are investing, we could start immediately. We have to have for a suppose $2 million project, we are working very hard, invest a lot of time for GCF and GF, and they both have different standards and formats for applying in a project. That could save a lot of time, because philosophy and mandate more or less the same for 2 organizations, 2 umbrella. So if we can unify that umbrella and make our processing time shorter and can work together, that will, because a vulnerable country needs money for adaptation is a need for immediate action. So if we spend a lot of time in the processing and exhaust our energy and our efforts in running after that, that is sometimes frustrating. And two other different focal points in government or any other organization, they have their own understanding territory. It's coordination among two is sometimes difficult. So if it can merge and come in one umbrella and can fund similar projects, it helps. It will help definitely country a lot and save our energy for implementation in a better way and qualitative way. And another point I'd like to mention that GF, I have the opportunity to talk with there is a event, nature-based solution, organized by Standing Committee on Finance, and one colleague from GCF, he mentioned that uh, in the secretariat, yeah, they have staff problem to scrutinize the the project proposal received from the country state country party. So from your end, I think secretariat should need to strengthen their capacity as well, so that they can sort the applications and the proposals very quickly, and should be in a very online basis and a very client friendly way. That is one thing I can suggest, that this is working dedicated window for our country. It is our organization. So we want to see GCF window in a very unified and very vibrant. So whatever is required to strengthen and make the organization very vibrant, we would like to see that. And our support will be there for this cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Your Excellency, your thoughts on that? On the question of what can you tell us more about how we can serve you better as GCF and GF together?
Yeah, as I have mentioned, the nature for creations of those both uh, climate and environmental funds is to serve party, increase our resilience to different climate-induced disasters and different environmental crises. Responding to climate crisis and environmental crisis is something that have to be seen as urgency, is emergency. It's not a normal administrative matter. So we need to have different measure. I think if we consider that, we can simplify um, financial procedure from initial process up to approval, and in the cycle of implementations, disbursements of finance for implementation to secure country be able to cope with their increase in their resilience and adapt to their specific conditions. I think this is the first point. Second, I think I hear many times that um, creations of I have to make these statements. I'm sorry if too strong. Um, um, the Green Climate Fund tends to secure the risk, and to minimize risk sometimes require feasibility study and different conditions before a project um, document approved and goes to implementations. And this take times and times, and as I said, we lose the nature of the platform, financial platform itself, to serve party, so increasing our resilience, but because um, complexity requirement, then we adding uh, different conditions and before a country able to cope on specific event, we already have another event that increase more cost, more impact. So I think we need to do a genuine reflections. Need to have 70% of the budget goes to climate actions, 30% or less than 30% goes to administrative matter. I think that's we need to have that conditions, because from feasibility study already country investing um, a lot, and if require delivery partners or credit entity investing to prepare the documents, already a lot of cost goes to that preparations of document, and that's if we can use those resources for quick do climate actions, we already save our one community from specific catastrophe. So I think we need to have a proper examinations to system we apply. The third point, I think we want to call for part for holding their moral responsibility as uh, party leaders declare in Paris to be able to mobilize 100 billion for green climate funds. We still far. I think from the reporting document by GCF, we noticed that it's still far from that amount. So we, LDCs and SIDS country, we don't want to um, state it, repeat it many times as the victim of the historical process of climate change, but we want to call your responsibility that this is the time moving from Glasgow Pact to what Mr. Antonio Guterres said in the opening statement. Sharm el-Sheikh Solidarity Pact need to deliver, and we for your promises to deliver 100 billion for GCF. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see Aziz, your thought.
Yeah, what I want to add is that the first thing for me is just to have a very big view and looking project on the ground first, analyzing those projects, and this allow countries to have a very big view on what really is the way we need to move to go further. This is the first thing, because we need to have a very how to say working program and clearly know what we really put the focus. The second point is I come again into communication, because if you go to the country, you can see sometimes the GCF focal point and the JEF focal point, they never work together. Yeah, and this was, and this situation also is sometimes a very difficult thing for maybe the private sector or other how to say institution who want really to address some project. What I propose here is to maybe working to put in place a coordination mechanism for the two instruments. If we can allow, if we can help maybe countries to put in place a coordinating mechanism using the two instruments, this is, yeah, will really help on the communication aspects. This maybe the third thing is also the ministry mentioned this. We spend many time between the approval of the project and the implementation. And maybe if we mix the two mechanisms, I think that we need also to work on a very, how to say, clear way to better going fast between and to reduce really the time between the approval of the project and the implementation phases. This is also one of the big challenges we need to address on this new deal between the mix of the two mechanisms. I think this is the 3 points. Yeah, what I want to add on the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aziz. Very useful. I believe Excellency has to go for another engagement. Please feel free to anytime you're ready. But we would like to thank you very much for your views. We are not done yet. We're going to come back yourself. Thank you very much. Just that we have to let Excellencies go. Thank you for your time. Couple of things that I picked up from here, the conversation is that obviously there are a lot of things we can improve on in terms of processing time. I also heard Madam Excellency, maybe a harmonized, coordinated approach of delivering a score. Probably we could find a ways to see how some of this money used for conduct some of the feasibility studies. How could that be, in fact, be turned into a real investment? That's what I heard from Excellency Demetrius. So with that, I want to quickly open this for a couple of minutes. If there is anything that from the audience, if you want to raise any questions, comments, queries, yes, but you need to introduce yourself as well.
Hello, my name is Safia Hassan. I'm a climate change activist from Chad, and I've been working with a local NGO within the Lake Chad region. So my question today is, so I have been in contact with Jeff and GCF with the country's coordinate point. But the issue is, coming from there's a lot of corruption, and sometimes if the money or the fund is going towards certain projects, everyone can have their own NGO, and the money, if it's, for example, with the government side, the minister could have his own NGO, and technically it is an NGO registered in Chad, but is it going towards the right people or indigenous people? So for me, coming from an indigenous community in the north of Chad within the Sahara Desert, it's really hard to get access to funds. And even when I raised the questions, and I've just been turned down. So I was wondering how there can be more transparency and a better communication to ensure that Jeff and Jeff make sure that their funds go towards the right people, and that the funds, and that after the project has been implemented, if there could be a review on the impact of the project.
Thank you very much. I believe the question comes to GCF and Jeff. We'll try to collect some more questions if there are. Anything else? Anyone? No, it's going 1. It's going to go at 3. Yep.
Hello, I'm Brahim Sal. I'm coming from Mauritania. And I just wanted to look, to ask whether there is any coordinating mechanism that is put in place globally at a global level. And if there is any, as you just mentioned, activities going through the kind of mechanism even at regional or national level, mechanism for coordinating between institutions. Thank you.
We'll take one last question. 2 last question then.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Adom. I work for the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. I wanted to just make a comment on the feasibility studies that you mentioned. So the question is, how do we reduce the number of, those studies that we carry out to be able to get the evidence or the need to carry out these activities? And that is something that we trying to address to see how our member states can build data infrastructure at national level. Once you build that infrastructure, then you have a point of data source that everybody can go in to access whatever information they are looking for. So that you don't go, everybody, we don't have to go every time to start from scratch to collect data for decision making. Governments need to play a role to create that kind of national infrastructure on data that will enable future data collection process. So that's something that we are working on. It's still at the concept level. So yeah, just wanted to mention it.
Thank you, Data. Yeah, the final one.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Delegate from Antigua and Barbuda. So I had a question. I came a bit late, so sorry, I came late. Delegate from Antigua and Barbuda. I had a question for the panelists as well as for GCF in general when it comes to implementing projects, when there are sub-projects being provided to local communities. What are some of the ways that you guys are working on making sure that you're reducing risks? So de-risking funding that's provided. It kind of is similar to the question that's coming from Chad as well. Just making sure that when the fund does get to local communities, I know that GCF you try to make sure that we're not doing risky investments in general. So how do you reduce risks working with local communities, and what are recommendations that would be provided to countries that are hoping to ensure that we're improving the access to finance?
Thank you very much. Yeah, these are all excellent questions covering a wide width and depth and breadth of the climate finance in general, I suppose. I'll try to attempt some, and of course I'll pass mic to Eduardo. He'll be able to provide you more answer to that. But to answer to you on the Chad on the issue of funding being not getting down to the grassroots level, I think one of the things, the mechanism of delivery of our finance, be it GCF or GEF, is that it is a country driven, meaning that it has to be signed off by operational focal points or NDA. That's how it is, right? But in the process of signing off, what happens is that there is a solid requirement for the stakeholder consultations to be conducted. And that is reviewed in a very robust manner, I would say. What I'm saying is it enough? I don't think so. There obviously are ways to enhance those. But we are guided by our policies of the stakeholder consultation. There is a redress mechanism in each of the funds, and there are a number of things being put in place. And every time when we find that policies are not adequate enough, our council and our board subsequently enhance this, and that's how it's being done. And having said that, I'm not saying that is a panacea for everything else. There might be cases of being not able to serve better in a number of different ways. Coming to Ben, right? Your question on the global mechanism. I'm sorry my apology if I didn't get my name. My memory is less than 3 seconds, honestly. So in the question of global mechanism, this is what I was talking about in the beginning. The presentation here today, it's a series of one of the long-term visions of complementary and coherency between GEF GCF. So there is already a mechanism being established, a task force is being established. And now we have moved into a new phase where we have selected to work with 5 different countries on how this is going to work out. So in brief, I would say that there is a mechanism. Is this going to mechanism address everything? Well, let's find out. But we have started to do something on this. On the question of common COMSEC right? I think our intent is same. I think if we have the data and information and climate information being generated, it should be able to reuse and recycle to the context of the project. And I think I would say that from the Jeff side, we have huge focus on climate information going forward for next 4 years. So it should be able to help some of them. On the question of sorry, I forgot the last question. So anyway, I'll let Eduardo get to that point.
Thank you, Dorji, and you actually made my life a bit easier already with your answers. And I think perhaps, of course, Dr. Ahmed, Dr. Aziz, you might want to take the mic as well. I'll be brief. Also, I'll just compliment my colleague Dorji. The first question on how do we make sure there are no impacts or that the money reaches the ground and we manage the risks. In addition to what Dorji was mentioning, we work through partner institutions, which we call accredited institutions, accredited entities. And the process of accreditation is very strict as well. So we want to make sure that these institutions, same with the Jeff, I believe, have the mechanisms and processes in place to make sure to diminish the number of risks. Of course, if the risks happen, we have the redress mechanism. We're available to have conversations with the communities that feel they have been impacted negatively. There is also a role for the national focal points institutions. At the GCF side, we ask that they're called NDAs, and for the GCF, we ask them that they mobilize the communities that might be affected by the projects we invest in on an annual basis to make sure things are moving as they should. And if they're not, of course, the government would be in a good place to let the GCF know and we'll act on that. In terms of coordination mechanisms, I think Dorji addressed it all, what I wanted to say as well. A good question about the studies, right? So we don't have to start everything by scratch. The GCF has been putting a lot of effort into creating database on climate as well. We'd like to, in the near future, be able to let our partner project developers know that in country A, investments in this type of activity or that type of risk to increase resilience or tackle the opportunities of mitigation are understood by the GCF, so that there's no huge effort in proving to the GCF every single time that there is climate grounds to that proposal. So that's coming up. We're already developed a lot of work. There's partnership with the WMO to put to that information that's already available, some of that on our websites. And on the implementing sub-projects, the last question, Dorji, about how to implement the sub-projects. Well, the GCF has a couple of mechanisms to do that, right? We do approve projects and programs that allow the accredited entity to then select sub-projects based on some pre-approved criteria. That will be discussed with the GCF, approved by the GCF. But just this morning, for instance, I was speaking with Profonampi in Peru that was reminding me that they just approved one of these projects in Peru. They were happy with it. Now they have the criteria by which they will channel down some of the grant money that they received from the GCF and make sure that those other institutions or projects are invested at their discretion. Of course, they have to respect what we pre-approved in terms of criteria. But I'd like perhaps to also mention something. My last point is that there might be a misconception that the GCF or the JEF do not want to do risky investments, right? I think what you wanted to say is that risky in terms of corruption and lack of capacity on the ground to implement. But that's right. But and
Sorry, I was also kind of thinking about the non-informal sectors. So if it's not like bigger business persons, like companies that are just starting, they're like smaller businesses, individuals that might have, they might be operating out of their homes, etc. Like we want to be able to provide more funding to vulnerable communities that are trying to make a difference, but it's just that they don't have maybe certain documentation in place as yet to start to be more formal, and we're just trying to figure out different ways to help them be a part of the process as well.
So please, I won't make myself too long on that, but come speak with us. We do want to do that. Right? There are mechanisms, there are solutions. The money has really to reach the ground to the beneficiaries that need them. But I'll stop here. Dorji, do you want to compliment?
No, I just remembered question again. Sorry. But you know that de-risking, actually the LDCF, SCCF sits on the cutting edge side of the taking risks. And if you turn back a couple of years down, you see my colleague who actually works in that program, the challenge program, where he collects all this, the information on how to do this. Anyway, that's just to cut the discussion short. We are doing those risk taking by investing on these things.
Dr. Ahmed, Dr.
Any
Aziz, would you like to, yes?
final
Compliment as well?
words?
Yes, regarding audience interest, I would say that in terms of stakeholders consultation and participation and access, we would, as national focal point and focal point of GEF, I would say that it's fully transparent. The process is so exhaustive. That's why we are asking them to make it short and easy so that it can be more easier. So the question of non-transparency and non-accountability, that is in our case, it is, I would say, it is almost zero. It's very much transparent, and all the stakeholders are involved in GCF and GF projects, and our small community and NGO organization, they are also taking part in the implementation of GF and GCF projects, and they are very much aware of what is happening. So that kind of involvement is there, and definitely from this COP and GF and GCF operational part, and the contribution, the amount, the volume, we would definitely expect that the GCF and GF fund will grow more, and they will become very smooth and short-termly accessible to the countries like LDCF, and especially countries with vulnerabilities in terms of climate change. So, and also I would definitely recommend that to strengthen the office itself so that they can scrutinize and process the approval process as soon as possible. So with that note, and thank you for organizing and listening to LDC countries' voice. Thank you.
Yes, in the point lays to the data structure to put in place to better help, maybe because we spend also many time when we prepare the project by doing many pre-feasibility study, market study, something like this. I think we can work on the coordination and the mechanism on the local level to put in place, yes, a very strong data structure where many institutions, or if we need some information like about this project, we can go and. But the problem is sometimes when you discuss with GCF, they say you need to update the data, and yeah, this is maybe something that we need to work closely with the how to say the country level and see what we can maybe do with them to help them to have this structure, but and sometime to update the data they are collecting. The second thing is what we can do to reduce waste investment. They have very strong how to say instrument and mechanism. Sometimes I think is it very difficult sometimes to for the financing really they have, when we are implementing the project, they have some specific evaluation to see if really the project, the financing is dedicated to the indicated stakeholders, what is really the impact. We need also to maybe better strong our how to say our knowledge on implementing some specific rules, or having some update about GCF procedure or GF procedure on this way. I think if we do frequent update, this is also can help to avoid maybe waste investment, or like Madam said, to better address really the financing on the best way. This is maybe, but many of the questions are addressed to GCS staff and they really respond.
I would like to add with my last comment that uh, since our country we have a national adaptation plan now, we'd urge that, and we believe that the next project, coming project, since we have NAP now and list of identified activities and priorities are done, it is kind of feasibility is over. So identified projects are there. So whether is a national agency or the NGOs can work in that particular area mentioning in the NAP, that could be very useful for us as well as GCF and GF, that it is in the list. We have identified 113 projects, 113. So if anyone can work to address that particular area, they can mention that we want to contribute, we want to work in this particular area. That would be very helpful for both National Focal Point State Party, also to GCF and GF. And more country when we'll come up with NAP, that will be helpful to facilitate the process. That I think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And I think we have well past our allocated time. Eduardo, maybe we will close the session, but let me just say on behalf of Jeff, thank you, panelists, all of you being here and sharing your thoughts on this. Thank you also for everyone listening to this. I think what I could say is that I'm not going to try to capture the substantive comment of this. This is all being recorded, and I've written down the notes here as well. But other than to say that the conversation that we have had is such an enriching one. Obviously, this is going to inform how we drive forward, especially, I mean, just as the Madam Secretary, you mentioned about the NAPs, that's exactly the intent we have. We just do not want to repeat the things that's been done. So if you have the list of priorities, we welcome countries, agencies, executing partners to come up with the projects, and so that we could help in a much more complementary, coordinated way. With that, on behalf of Jeff, thank you very much, and I hand it over to Eduardo.
Thank you. I'll just say a few words of thank you as well to our distinguished guests. Thank you very much for everything you provided in terms of your thoughts today. We organized this to hear from you, but I'd also like to extend the invitation for the audience and colleagues in this environment, colleagues of the GEF and the GCF, to think about these opportunities that our guests mentioned today of escalating or partnering, seeing a partnership, seeing complementarity between the two institutions. On our side, as Dorji mentioned, we are looking for those opportunities to have the two institutions collaborating more strongly, to perhaps remove these boxed environments, right? If I might put it that way, to increase the harmonization. But that goes through identifying the opportunities. At the end of the day, we have to see the money hitting the ground. So we'd love to invite you also to help us in that effort. But thank you very much.